Well, imagine that half of Australia's coal mines were shut down. Coal trains stopped, export ships no longer leaving port, be front page news. And then imagine that the Commonwealth Minister said that miners needed to rethink their strategy, stop relying so much on these valuable exports. You'd hear the outcry from Carmichael to Collie. That's exactly the situation facing the international education industry in Australia right now. Education is our fourth largest export, behind iron ore, coal and gas, worth $37.5 billion a year. That's about half the value of our coal exports. And ABS figures show that only 360 international students arrived in Australia in January, compared with 91,000 in the previous January. And yes, it's true that many universities have made themselves too reliant on international student fees, but shutting the door and leaving prospective students stranded is cutting off our nose to spite our face. Here in Victoria, Federation University, a regional university, is the hardest hit. But it's not only the universities who are suffering. International students support thriving local economies across our cities, suburbs and regions. Student populations are down right across middle suburbs of Melbourne like Box Hill, Burwood and Clayton. Walk down the streets near a campus and you see shops shut. Small businesses in our suburbs are paying the price. The government solution is apparently to just teach online. I don't know about you, but after a year stuck on Zoom, I am sick of it. And students want more than a glitchy lecture delivered on a dodgy internet connection. They want the experience of Australia. In September, Northern Hemisphere universities will start their next academic year. The success of the US and the UK's vaccination rollout makes them a much more attractive destination than Australia. Who knows when our vaccine rollout will be complete? And meanwhile, our international borders remain largely closed. Australia might have won the battle against COVID infections, but it risks losing the economic recovery if our vaccination and quarantine programs remain in a shambles. And we can't open the door again to our fourth largest export. So Kai, international education is hugely important for Australia. What do you think the government needs to do?
Oh, geez. Well, look, look, Ryan, I probably would need to, look, when it comes to international students, how do I put this? I think that there are many people, including international students, that are concerned that the reliance universities have on international student dollars, who pay enormous fees, by the way, actually can damage the reputation of those universities. I mean, I just continue to hear, even from friends who are international students themselves, about how how lecturers and academics are basically passing a lot of students who either have their essays written by other people or basically aren't really writing very good essays to begin with. And I think that that's disappointing. That said, I wouldn't want our way of looking at the international student dependency that our universities have to be dependent on COVID-19 and the outcomes we get from that. I also would probably take exception with what you say about how, say, the UK and their vaccine rollout makes them a more attractive destination. I think any international student looking for somewhere to go at the moment, it would look at the death toll and the infection rate in those countries and look at Australia, and I still think Australia shapes up pretty well. But of course, we still have very tight border controls at the moment. So look, I guess, look, I am very aware that education is a massive export industry for Australia. It's our #1 services export, and we need to be able to wean ourselves off our dependency on digging stuff out of the ground and selling it to China. So on that respect, I do agree with you, but I do think at some point, if we want that to be a sustainable industry for us, like the education industry, I think we need to make sure that we retain the quality within it. I'm not quite sure how to do it, considering how dependent universities currently are on those international student fees.
So Emily, what's the view from Sydney on this question?
Yeah, so I would agree quite strongly with the idea we need to open up our borders. It's honestly ridiculous, this vaccine rollout. My 20-year-old sister, who is perfect health, has gotten vaccinated in the States. It's embarrassing that Australia is falling so far behind. And when our health minister is saying that we're the envy of the world, I wonder, what countries is he talking about? Certainly not in the first world. And many third world countries have us beat with their vaccine rollouts. So we need to get on top of that sooner than later. And we need to open up the borders. We need to allow internationals to travel for various reasons, to study, to work, to see loved ones. As you probably can tell by my accent, I haven't seen my family in 2 years and have missed 2 Christmases. I would love to go home and visit them at some point, and I'm sure I am not alone. But we can't, because Australia can't get its vaccine rollout together and isn't opening up its borders. So I think that's a top priority right now, and it applies to international students and it applies to other people, expats and internationals who would like to come here to work.
Coralie, you were quite critical of the West Australian government. Has the Australian government, has the Commonwealth dropped the ball on our vaccine rollout?
Well, look, Ryan, I'm not going to give you a whack just yet till the end of this, but what I will say is I am in agreement with you. I think that it's such a shame that a lot of the information that is being sent out to the international market, students are learning online on Twitter. I'd like to say, we've got 50 odd universities in Australia. What's wrong with their messaging and actually getting it together? I do believe that Australia risks being a hermit kingdom unless we do open up our international borders. I can actually tell you from personal experience, last year I was sessional tutoring at Murdoch University, one of WA's largest ones. First semester was a wipeout. Second semester I did 3 or 4 courses. I got a phone call in November saying, unfortunately, because of your favourite Premier's decision to keep the borders shut, no interstate students were allowed to come across at all. We were already told they wouldn't be allowed until the end of March this year. People know that the academic year begins in March, and it's such a shame. The other thing that people need to know is that a lot of the universities in Western Australia, they're spending more than $1 billion on building new campuses within the CBD, but there are no students coming from either internationally or interstate. Lectures are being used that will now be in their 3rd year of being used online. I agree with you that it's not the experience, and you're quite right that a lot of these wonderful international students, they're going to end up going to other markets, to the United Kingdom, to Canada, to the United States, and Australia seems to have its head in the sand thinking, oh, when we open up, they'll come back to us. They won't. They'll already be hooked into other markets. But, as I said, I'm going to give you a little whack. This is also a casualty of that hard border of Western Australia, because a lot of international students decided to go via another way over to the actual East Coast, and a lot of them that were there just stayed there anyway. So I just think that Australia has to bite the bullet, get on with the vaccination rollout and open up these borders and get this industry happening. There are so many jobs at stake.
So, Ryan, you're in favour
of this vaccine rollout.
Yeah, so Ryan, I just want to get this straight. I mean, so basically you're in favour of bringing our international students on, letting them come back in here, but you seem to be against open state borders at the same time.
No, I think a managed quarantine program is exactly what we need, and it's one that we could apply internationally or domestically. I think if we had a nation free of community transmission, the state borders would be down just like they were pre-Christmas in Perth, just like they are from time to time. But we had a proper vaccination rollout program, all of this endless cycle of lockdown would be over. Like, I don't understand why Australia is so far behind the rest of the world when it comes to our vaccine rollout program, and I don't understand why our quarantine system is still, being run through hotels. Where are the purpose-built quarantine camps? They're the things that the federal government should have been focused on for the last 12 months. Well, they've had to plan for this.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of the quarantine thing, they're based in our capital cities in case people get really, really sick with COVID. But the thing is, I think Australia is being incredibly naive and silly to go down an eradication process. We need international tourism to come back to Australia. We need, it's happening. The reason why those tennis players in Melbourne reacted in the way that they did when they came over for the Australian Open is the rest of the world, while Australia has been hunkered down, has been getting on learning how to live with the virus. This is something we're going to have to learn to live with. Like any other infectious disease, yes, people can argue that COVID-19 has more severe side effects, but it's an infectious disease. And the thing is, we cannot afford to be more of an island than we already are. We need to get back as a nation. We need to have a roadmap out of this done by the federal government and bring these state governments into line and show them who's the boss and say, right, we're back in business. There are so many sectors in this country that are just going down the tubes, and by the time we come good, the markets will have gone.
I think the other thing that's important is that we're losing this great moment to have Australia's cultural diplomacy writ large. International students coming to Australia also bring the ability for them to connect with us, with democracy, with our freedoms, with our values. I think now more than ever, we want to be making sure that the future leaders of our region are learning about the world through our world-class universities, through our world-class higher education system. It's been one of the strengths that we've had over a generation, post-war, the Colombo Plan. They were really significant tools for Australia's soft power in the region. At the moment, we seem to be closing those doors and turning our backs on what could be the next wave of ensuring that we are connected with the future leaders of Asia. I think that, as much as anything else, is one of the reasons why we need to fix this international student mess, why the Commonwealth's got to get back on track with the vaccine rollout, and why we need a better approach to quarantine. And it seems right across the board, all of those things need to be done in order to fix this problem.
Yeah, I have a couple things I'd like to add on to that.
Yeah.
Now, one is with the vaccine, I really don't see much of a need for quarantine at this point. I think we should be allowing people that are vaccinated to come into Australia and move about freely. They are a very low risk, and I think that's a risk that we should be willing to take. And the other thing I want to add to that is our approach to COVID and the way some of our states have acted has really not shed or put Australia in a very good light. And I think we've got a lot of work to do to build back our reputation. A lot of us see us as having policies that are as strict or as harsh or seem as harsh as China, the way Victoria's lockdowns went about, and that really strict and only letting people out for an hour to a day has really tarnished Australia's reputation. And people are looking at us around the world and be like, well, are they a free country? And that's not good. We need to fix that. And one of the best ways to do that is to start bringing people in, start showing them Australia, start getting our policies back together, start letting people move about freely, and really fix Australia's reputation internationally.